Martha, look out your window. Tell me you see it too.
40 of them.
Lord help us, 40 Hell's Angels right outside Florence's place.
Are the engines running?
Nothing's running. They've been there all night.
40 grown men just sitting in the snow?
Somebody call Sheriff Tibbs.
Earl already knows. He says, and get this, they're sleeping inside.
Inside? With Florence? She's 80 years old alone. What was she thinking?
You know exactly what she was thinking. The same thing that woman's always thinking.
She fed them, didn't she?
Every last one. Emptied her whole kitchen.
The night the rest of us locked our doors.
That diner's going to be on the news.
Honey, that diner's going to be a war zone.
But that's not what happened. Nobody in Cooper's Crossing could have guessed what those 40 men would do next, because this story began long before the storm.
18 hours earlier, the storm hit Cooper's Crossing like a fist. The radio called it the worst blizzard in 40 years. Highway 212 vanished under white. The state police closed every road in and out of the county by 6, and the temperature kept falling. 10 below, 15 below, 20. Out on Highway 212, 40 motorcycles crawled through the whiteout at 15 miles an hour. The riders wore leather built for wind, not for cold like this. Ice crusted their beards white. Their gloves froze to the grips. Cole Bennett rode point, squinting into a wall of snow that swallowed his headlight whole. He had led this chapter for 20 years. He had ridden through hurricanes, through desert heat, through funerals. He had never been scared on a bike until tonight. Behind him, 40 men trusted him to find shelter. The nearest motel was 30 miles back. Some of the younger riders had stopped shivering. Cole knew what that meant. The body quits shivering right before it quits everything else. Then he saw lights. A town. Cooper's Crossing heard them coming before it saw them. 40 engines sound like war, even at a crawl. The motel manager saw the patches and flipped his sign to no vacancy with the lobby lights still on. The gas station locked its doors. The church went dark. Up and down Main Street, porch lights died one by one, like a town holding its breath. Cole knocked on 3 doors. 3 doors stayed shut. He stood in the middle of the street, snow stacking on his shoulders, and made the only call left. They would shelter against the buildings and try to survive until dawn. Some of them would not. That was when the blue door opened. Florence Hayes had been awake since the first thunder of the storm. Blizzards never let her sleep. 52 years ago, she and Walter had opened this diner in a storm just like this one, and every whiteout sense felt like him knocking. She saw the headlights from her window above the diner. She counted them. Then she counted again, because no one would believe 40. She came downstairs in her robe and turned on every light she had. Cole saw the glow and walked toward it, like a man walking toward the last warm thing on earth. He knocked. The door opened before his second knock landed. "Ma'am," his voice cracked from the cold. "I have 40 men out here freezing to death. We will pay whatever you ask. We just need a roof." Florence looked up at him. 6'4", 260 pounds, skull rings on frozen fingers, a death's head stitched across his back. Then she looked past him at the shapes swaying in the snow. "Well, don't just stand there letting my heat out," she said. "Get them inside." They filed in one by one, dripping and shaking, filling every booth and every inch of floor. 40 men in a diner built for 30. Florence tied her apron and went to war. She emptied the freezer first, 12 pounds of bacon hit the griddle, and the smell alone brought 2 half-frozen men back to life. She cracked eggs by the carton. She dropped every loaf of bread she owned into the toaster, 4 slices at a time. The big soup pot, the one she had not used since Walter died, came down off its hook. Her hands trembled when she poured the coffee, not from fear, from 80 years of living. A young rider with frostbitten ears watched the cup shake and reached out to steady it. She let him. Neither said a word about it. Around 3 a.m, a rider with a gray beard finally asked the question hanging over the room. "Ma'am, you know who we are, right? Why'd you open the door?" Florence refilled his cup without looking up. "I know you were cold," she said. "Cold doesn't check your jacket." The room went quiet. 40 men who had been called animals in every town from here to Denver stared into their cups. By dawn, the storm had blown itself out. The men slept where the warmth had caught them, in booths, against the counter, stretched across the floor like fallen timber. Florence stood at the window with her last cup of coffee and watched the snow turn pink in the sunrise. She had given away every scrap of food in the building. She didn't know it yet, but one man by the register had already noticed the envelope on the counter, the red one, stamped "Final Notice." Morning came up slow and gold over the snow. Inside the diner, 40 men woke one by one to the smell of the last pot of coffee. They moved quietly for big men. Someone folded the blankets Florence had brought down. Someone else washed dishes without being asked, sleeves rolled, tattoos in the soapy water. Cole Bennett stood at the register, wallet open, counting out $100 bills. That was when he saw the envelope. Red stamp, "Final Notice." He should have looked away. He didn't. The letter inside was from First Cattleman's Bank, and the numbers were ugly. $180,000. 90 days past due. Beneath the bank's letterhead sat a second page, cleaner, colder, from a company called Sutter Ridge Development, an offer to buy the property at auction, pennies on the dollar. At the bottom of the offer sat a signature in confident blue ink, Preston Vance, a name that meant nothing to Cole, yet. Cole put the letter back exactly where he found it. Then he looked around the diner with new eyes. The duct tape on the booth seats, the water stain spreading across the ceiling tiles, the furnace that coughed every 20 minutes like an old smoker. This woman had fed 40 strangers from a kitchen she could not afford to fill again. On the wall behind the register hung 50 years of photographs. Cole studied them, while Florence wiped the counter. A young couple in front of the diner, 1970s haircuts, paint cans at their feet. The same couple, older, gray creeping in, still smiling. Then, just her. "Your husband?" Cole asked. "Walter." She said the name like it still tasted good. 52 years in this room. He flipped, I poured. He died 6 years ago, right over there, restocking the pie case. Heart just stopped. The ambulance took 40 minutes because of the ice. Kids? We tried. Wasn't in the cards. She straightened a sugar jar. This place is my family. Was, anyway. Town's got 2 new gas stations with hot food now. Folks stopped coming. You forget an old woman real easy when she's quiet about it. Cole laid $800 on the counter. Florence pushed it back. "I didn't cook for money. I cooked because you were hungry. Ma'am, that food was your last." "Then it went to good use, didn't it?" Cole stared at her. 20 years running a chapter taught a man to read people fast. There was no angle here, no fear, no charity show, no cameras. Just an old woman who had decided a long time ago what kind of person she was going to be. Word moved through the diner the way word moves among men who ride together. Quiet. Fast. By noon, every rider knew about the red envelope, and the room had gone strange and still. The young rider with the frostbitten ears, a kid they called Trip, said what they were all thinking. She saved our lives last night, all 40, and some bank's about to take her home? Cole didn't answer. He had stopped listening because he was staring at the front door. He had seen it last night through the snow and thought nothing of it. Now, in full daylight, it stopped his heart. The door was painted blue. Not navy, not teal. A soft, faded, robin's egg blue, chipped at the handle, repainted by hand so many times the brushstrokes stacked like rings in a tree. Cole crossed the room slowly. He put his hand flat against the paint, the way a man touches a gravestone. "Boss?" Trip said. "You good?" Cole didn't answer that either. He pushed the door open and walked out into the cold without his jacket. Through the window, 40 men watched their president stand alone in the snow, head down, shoulders shaking. Some of them had ridden with Cole Bennett for 2 decades. They had seen him stitched up in parking lots. They had seen him carry a casket. They had never once seen him cry. Inside, Florence dried the same plate twice, watching him through the glass. "Strange fella," she murmured. She had no way of knowing what that blue door meant to him. No way of knowing that years ago, in another life, a dying man had grabbed Cole's hand and made him swear to find it. Whatever promise lived behind that door, it was about to change everything for Florence Hayes. The roads opened 2 days later. The Hells Angels didn't leave. Cooper's Crossing watched it happen with binoculars and group texts. 40 bikers shoveling an old woman's parking lot at 7 in the morning. 40 bikers hauling firewood, patching the roof where the snow had crushed a gutter, carrying her trash cans out like schoolboys. Nobody could explain it, so everybody explained it. "They're casing the town," said the motel manager, who had flipped his sign. "They're using her place to move drugs," said a woman at the post office. "She's being held hostage," said someone's cousin on Facebook from 4 states away. The hostage, meanwhile, was teaching a man named Diesel how to crimp a pie crust. Inside the diner, 2 worlds were learning each other's language. Florence's lace curtains and flowered wallpaper, their leather and chrome and road dust. Her hymns on the radio at sunrise, their boots lined up by the door because she had asked exactly once. She called them her boys. Day 1 it was a joke. Day 3 it wasn't. She learned that Diesel had a daughter in Tulsa he hadn't seen in a year. That Trip aged out of foster care at 18 with 1 duffel bag. That half these men had nobody, which was exactly why they had each other. And the men learned that an 80-year-old widow could outswear a road captain when a pipe burst, and that nobody left her diner hungry. On the 4th day, the law showed up. Sheriff Earl Tibbs parked his cruiser across the street and sat there a full 10 minutes, working up to it. 30 years on the job, and he had never once walked toward 40 Hells Angels on purpose. The diner went silent when he stepped in. 40 pairs of eyes tracked the badge. "Florence." He kept his thumbs in his belt. "Folks in town are worried. I've had 11 calls. You want to tell me what's going on here?" "Earl Tibbs." Florence came around the counter with a coffee pot. "These gentlemen were freezing to death while this town hid under its beds. Now sit down. You look thin." "Florence, I can't just—" "Walter coached your Little League team, Earl. Sit." The sheriff sat. Diesel slid down a stool to make room. Somebody passed the cream. 20 minutes later, Earl Tibbs was deep in an argument about carburetors with a man whose vest read Road Captain, and his radio stayed quiet on the counter. Before he left, he stopped at the register and lowered his voice. "These boys giving you any trouble at all?" "First week in 6 years I haven't eaten supper alone," Florence said. "That answer your question?" It did. But on his way out, the sheriff paused by Cole and spoke too low for the room to hear. "I don't know what you boys are doing here, but if you're staying, you ought to know something. There's a man named Preston Vance been circling this block all winter, and whatever he wants, he gets." Cole's jaw tightened. Second time that name had crossed his path in 4 days. Across the street, in a black pickup with tinted glass, a man in a camel hair coat watched the diner through the windshield. He photographed the motorcycles. He photographed the new roof patch. Then he made a phone call that lasted 4 minutes and drove away. That night, for the first time, 2 riders sat on the porch until sunrise. Cole posted them there. He hadn't told anyone why he was still in Cooper's Crossing. The answer was folded in his saddlebag, in an envelope soft from 2 years of carrying. Cole waited until the diner emptied for the night. Florence was wiping down the counter when he sat across from her. He set a dented tin box between them. It was an old cookie tin, rusted at the seams, the kind grandmothers keep buttons in. "Ma'am, I need to tell you why we're still here," Cole said, "and I need you to sit down for it." Florence sat. Outside, snow ticked against the glass. 15 years ago, I had a brother named Wade, younger than me by 6 years. He went to war twice and came home wrong the second time. The kind of wrong you can't see on the outside. Florence's rag went still on the counter. He drank. He disappeared. We fought about it, and I said things a brother shouldn't say. Then one day, he was just gone. No calls, no letters. For 2 years, I didn't know if he was alive. Cole opened the tin. Inside lay a stack of letters, rubber banded, the paper gone soft as cloth. Then these started coming. 1 a month, near enough. He never said where he was. Postmark was always smudged or torn. But he wrote about a town buried in the mountains, and a diner there. Said he slept behind it, in the lean-to by the propane tank. The winter, everything inside him finally broke. Florence's hand rose slowly to her mouth. Cole slid the top letter across the counter. His hands, which could break a man's grip in a bar fight, were not steady. "Read it," he said. "Please." She put on her glasses. The handwriting was careful, the way men write when the words matter. "There's a woman here, Cole. She runs a diner with a blue door. Every morning she finds me out back and brings a plate. Eggs, toast, coffee with 2 sugars, though I never told her how I take it. She figured it out. She never asks my name. She never asks what happened to me. She just says, 'Looks cold out there, hun,' and leaves the plate. 4 months now. I think she knows that if she asked questions, I'd run. First person in years who let me stay broken in peace. I'm not drinking today, Cole." Day 41. You'd laugh at me, counting days like a kid counting stars, but this woman feeds a ghost every morning like it's nothing. And somehow, that makes a man want to be a person again. Florence lowered the letter. Her eyes had gone somewhere 15 years away. "The young man behind the diner," she whispered. "Skinny as a fence post. Army jacket with the name tape torn off. He'd never come inside. I tried. Lord knows I tried. So I just stopped trying and started cooking. One morning in spring, he was gone. left a little cross made of baling wire on the back step. I still have it. I prayed for that boy every Sunday since. I never even knew his name.
Wade, Cole said. His name was Wade Bennett. He got sober that winter and stayed sober. Got his welding certificate, got a little house, got 14 more years he swore he owed to you.
Got. Florence heard the past tense, and her chin began to tremble. Cancer took him 2 years ago. I was holding his hand at the end, and the last thing my brother ever asked me was to find a diner with a blue door, somewhere off Highway 212, and thank the woman who fed him when he was nobody. I looked for 2 years. Every small town, every old highway. 40 of us rode 10 states looking for a door. His voice broke clean in half. And then a blizzard threw us at it. Then the president of the Hells Angels came around the counter and knelt on the diner floor in front of an 80-year-old widow. He took her flour-dusted hands in his. "Thank you for my brother," he said. They cried together in the empty diner, the biker and the widow, while the coffee pot gurgled and the snow came down soft as forgiveness. The next morning, Cole called the chapter together in the parking lot. "Wade's woman is losing her diner," he said. That was the whole speech. It was enough. By 8, men were on the roof with new shingles. By 9, 2 prospects were rebuilding the furnace with parts trucked in from Billings. The road captain, a quiet giant named Hollis, repainted the front door the same robin's egg blue. 3 coats. Some things you don't change. And at 10, Cole Bennett walked into First Cattleman's Bank with a cashier's check and a folder under his arm. The branch manager, Lorraine Dunn, met him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was 50-something and tidy, and she had the look of a woman who hadn't slept right in months. "I'd like to bring the Hayes account current," Cole said. 3 months of arrears, plus penalties. Today. Lorraine's smile flickered. She typed. She frowned at her screen, then typed again. "Sir, this account has been flagged for accelerated proceedings. I can accept payment on the arrears, but the acceleration clause has already been invoked by the loan committee." "Then I'd like to see the loan documents. Original signatures. Mrs. Hayes authorized me this morning." He laid Florence's notarized letter on the desk. Lorraine went very still. Somewhere behind her eyes, a door opened and shut. She printed the file. Cole read it the way he read a road, slow and all at once. Walter Hayes had taken the original loan in 2009 to cover his heart medication, refinanced twice. Then, 18 months ago, a third refinance Florence had never mentioned. The signature on it was tall and slanted. Cole had spent the week watching Florence sign receipts and order forms. Her handwriting was small and round, like a schoolteacher's. He said nothing. He paid the arrears in full, took his receipt, and thanked Lorraine Dunn politely. But walking out, he passed a glass-walled office, and through it, he saw a man in a camel hair coat sitting where he didn't work, drinking coffee like he owned the building. The man smiled at Cole. Cole did not smile back. That night, he gathered Hollis and Tripp at the corner booth, Wade's old booth, and laid out 3 things on the table: the receipt, a photocopy of the refinance signature, a napkin where he'd asked Florence, casually, to jot her pie order. "Look at the F," he said. "Look at the H. Now tell me that's the same hand." Tripp looked. Hollis looked. It wasn't. Spring came early that year, or maybe it just felt that way. The story got out, the way stories do. A trucker posted a photo of 40 Harleys outside a tiny diner with a blue door, and the caption wrote itself: "The safest restaurant in Montana." People drove 2 hours to see it. They came nervous and left full. Bikers carried high chairs to tables and refilled coffee when Florence's hips ached. Sunday mornings sold out of pie by 10. For the first time in years, Florence needed help. She hired Katie Moore, a young single mother who had been cleaning motel rooms for $9 an hour. Katie cried in her car after the interview. Florence pretended not to see, then doubled the offer. The town thawed too. The motel manager came in one Tuesday, hat literally in hand, and ordered the meatloaf. Nobody said a word about his sign. Diesel passed him the ketchup.
And Florence laughed again. Katie noticed it first, the way the laugh started in her shoulders. The boys heard it from the kitchen and grinned at each other like they'd fixed something no parts catalog carried. In the evenings, she sat in Wade's old booth with Cole and told him 15 years of mornings. How the boy behind the diner liked his toast nearly burnt. How he sang sometimes, low, when he thought no one could hear. Cole collected every detail like a man picking up coins.
For 3 weeks, Cooper's Crossing was the kind of place people write postcards about. But quiet has two kinds: the quiet of peace and the quiet of a held breath. Because while the diner filled with laughter, paper moved through quiet offices. A health inspection was requested by an anonymous concerned citizen. A zoning review was opened. A reporter from the county paper got a tip and a folder of photographs free of charge. And in a glass office tower in Billings, Preston Vance studied a map of Cooper's Crossing with 6 properties shaded red. 5 were already his. The 6th had a blue door. He circled it twice and dialed his lawyer. "That diner off 212, he said. "I want it gone by Easter." The hit came on a Tuesday, and it came from 3 directions at once. The health inspector arrived at the breakfast rush with a clipboard and a man nobody recognized. He found a violation in the walk-in cooler, then another behind the griddle, then 6 more, written in language so vague even Katie, reading over his shoulder, couldn't tell what they'd done wrong. Florence had passed every inspection for 52 years. She kept the certificates in a drawer, ironed flat like Sunday dresses. The inspector didn't want to see them. He posted a yellow conditional notice in the window where the whole street could read it and left without finishing his coffee. Wednesday, the county paper ran the story. Front page, above the fold. Gang compound operating on Highway 212. The photographs were professional grade. 40 motorcycles shot with a long lens to look like an armed camp, a close-up of a death's head patch, and one cruel masterpiece. Florence in her apron, caught mid-blink, looking confused and small and used. The quote under it came from an unnamed community leader. Quote, "Our seniors are easy prey for these organizations. Someone needs to protect this woman from her so-called friends." End quote. The tour buses stopped coming. Half the locals followed. Katie counted 9 customers all day, and 4 of them were wearing leather. Thursday, the certified letter arrived. Florence read it standing up, then sat down hard. The bank had invoked the acceleration clause. The entire balance, $180,000, was due in 30 days. Failing payment, the property would go to public auction on the courthouse steps. April 9th, Walter's birthday. Across town, Lorraine Dunn sat in her office with the acceleration paperwork in front of her and Preston Vance behind her chair. "I'm not comfortable with this," she said quietly. "She's 80. That refinance file, Preston. If anyone ever pulls the original..." "Then nobody pulls the original." Vance buttoned his coat. "Lorraine, your son's DUI. The loan you approved for your sister that went sideways. We've been good to you. Sign." She signed. Her pen ran out halfway through her own name, and she had to borrow his. Friday, Preston Vance came to the diner himself. He came when Cole was in Billings ordering parts, which was not an accident. He wore the camel hair coat and the smile of a man holding all the cards, and he sat at the counter like a customer. Mrs. Hayes, Preston Vance, Sutter Ridge Development. I want to help you. Helped me into a yellow notice and a newspaper story already, Florence said. I'm not sure I can afford more of your help. Vance's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. Here's my offer. $90,000 cash this week. You walk away clean. No auction, no humiliation, no photographs of deputies carrying your furniture to the curb. There's a lovely senior community in Billings. Shuffleboard, bingo on Thursdays. This property appraised at $400,000 before you started squeezing it, Florence said. Walter built that counter you're leaning on with his own 2 hands. The answer is no. Vance stood. He smoothed his coat, and for just a moment, he let her see the real thing under the smile. In 30 days, I'll buy this place on the courthouse steps for $60. The offer was a kindness, Mrs. Hayes. I don't extend those twice. He dropped a $5 on the counter. For the coffee. Keep the change. You'll need it. That night, Florence Hayes broke. Not loudly. Old women don't break loudly. She waited until closing, until the boys were laughing over cards in the corner, and then she stood in the middle of her diner and took off her apron. I need you all to go, she said. The cards stopped. 40 faces turned. Florence, Tripp started. Look at what's happening. Her voice shook, and she hated it. Yellow paper on my window. My face in the paper, like a fool. That man is burning down everything you fixed, and he's doing it because you're here. You're 40 good men. You have homes, some of you. Lives. I won't be the reason this follows you, and you won't be the reason I lose what's left of mine. Ma'am, with respect, Hollis said, we've been thrown out of better places than this. It almost got a laugh. Almost. Please. The word came out cracked. I buried Walter. I can bury this place if I have to. But I will not stand at that window and watch them turn 40 decent men into criminals on my account. Please, boys, go home. Nobody moved for a long time. Then Cole, who had come back from Billings an hour before and heard everything from the kitchen doorway, stepped into the room. You heard her, he said. Pack it up. Tripp stared at him like he'd been slapped. Hollis opened his mouth, met Cole's eyes, and closed it. One by one, the men gathered their things. Florence stood by the register with her hands knotted together, doing the hardest thing love does, which is push. 40 engines started in the dark. The sound rolled across Cooper's Crossing like thunder leaving, and people came to their windows to watch the column ride out, headlights stretching down Highway 212 until the cold swallowed them. Florence locked the blue door and climbed the stairs to her empty rooms. She did not cry where anyone could see. She was from a generation that didn't. In the morning, the parking lot was just snow. The diner was just quiet. And Preston Vance, reading his morning report, allowed himself a real smile at last. He should have asked one more question. He should have asked where they went. Because the column did not ride for home. It rode 20 minutes up the highway to a hunting lodge, Hollis knew, with bunks for 50 and a long table for planning. And on that table, Cole Bennett spread out everything they had. She thinks we left, he said. Good. Let Vance think it too. He tapped the photocopied signature, tall and slanted, nothing like a schoolteacher's hand. We don't fight this man with fists. We'd lose even if we won. We fight him with paper. He looked around the table at 40 faces lit by a propane lantern. Wade taught me something at the end. He said the strongest thing a man can do is stay.
So we stay. We dig. And in 30 days, on those courthouse steps, we bury Preston Vance in the truth. The lodge became a war room.
It turned out 40 Hells Angels held more useful skills than any law firm in Montana. Diesel had pulled title records in a past life as a repo man. 2 prospects had been Army intelligence. And the quiet writer everyone called Professor had a framed law degree in a storage unit in Denver under the name Arthur Whitfield, Esquire. 20 years I've been professor, he said, cracking his knuckles over a borrowed laptop. Tonight, Mr. Whitfield comes out of retirement. They started with the county records, and the county records told a story. In 3 years, Sutter Ridge Development had acquired 5 properties along Highway 212. A feed store, a motel, 2 ranches, a filling station. Every seller was over 70. Every sale closed within weeks of a foreclosure notice. And every foreclosure traced back to 1 branch, 1 loan officer, 1 bank. First Cattleman's. Lorraine Dunn's desk. The pattern was the easy part. Proving forgery was not. For that, they needed originals, and the originals sat in bank archives behind locked doors. That was when Katie Moore knocked on the lodge door with snow in her hair and her chin set. "You really thought I bought that whole riding off into the sunset act," she said. "Florence cries every night. So tell me what you need." What they needed, it turned out, Katie had. Or rather, her grandmother's best friend had. Maxine Croft, 31 years the county recorder, retired but never quite finished. Maxine knew where every deed in the county slept. More importantly, Maxine had filed the certified copies of every loan instrument recorded against real property, because Montana law required it. She arrived at the lodge the next evening in a Buick older than Tripp, carrying a cherry pie and a banker's box. "Preston Vance evicted my church group from the feed store hall," she announced. "I've been waiting 2 years for somebody to ask me about that man." The box held photocopies of recorded instruments. Whitfield spread 6 refinance agreements across the long table, and Maxine laid her reading glasses on her nose, and the lodge went quiet. 6 elderly borrowers. 6 refinances, none of them seemed to remember signing, and 6 signatures that leaned tall and slanted to the right, with the same strange little hook on every capital letter. "Same hand," Whitfield said softly. 6 documents, 6 different names, 1 writer. "Gentlemen, this is not foreclosure. This is fraud on an industrial scale." They needed one more thing. A witness. Hollis found Lorraine Dunn on a Sunday, alone in the back pew of First Lutheran, which told them something about the weight she was carrying. He didn't threaten. He didn't even sit close. He just slid a photograph down the pew. Florence at the register, smiling, handing a plate to a trucker. "She's 80 years old, ma'am," Hollis said. "April 9th, they auction her life on the courthouse steps. You can watch it happen, or you can be the reason it doesn't." Lorraine looked at the photograph for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than it had been in months. "He keeps the original files in his office, not the bank. Off the books. And Mr. Whitfield, if that's really who's asking, should know something else." She took a breath, like a woman stepping off a ledge. "I kept copies of everything. Insurance, I told myself. Cowardice, more like. There's a storage locker on Route 3. I'll give you the key, and I'll give the state my testimony." With Lorraine's recorded statement, made knowingly, and on advice of her own lawyer, Whitfield drove to Helena and sat down with an old classmate who now worked financial crimes for the State Department of Justice. Her name was investigator Renata Vossler,
and she had been building a quiet file on Sutter Ridge for a year without enough to move. She read the file twice. Then she looked up.
"You understand what you've handed me," she said. "Forged instruments, coerced bank officers, 6 victims over 70. If this holds, it's not just civil, it's prison."
"It'll hold," Whitfield said. "When can you move?"
"These things take months."
"Ma'am, the auction is in 9 days." Vossler held his eyes for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and canceled her week.
Back in Cooper's Crossing, Florence Hayes knew none of it. She spent her evenings packing 52 years into cardboard boxes, one photograph at a time. She kept the baling wire cross for last. April 9th came up clear and cold, the kind of morning Walter Hayes used to call pie weather. The auction was set for 10 on the courthouse steps in Garrison, the county seat. By 9:30, Preston Vance stood front and center in a charcoal suit, flanked by his lawyer and a man with a checkbook. He had done this 5 times. He knew the choreography. A clerk reads the legal description. Nobody bids against him because nobody crosses him. He buys a life's work for the price of a pickup truck and is home by lunch. Florence came because Maxine Croft insisted she not hide. She stood at the edge of the small crowd in her church coat, both hands on her purse, watching strangers prepare to sell her kitchen. At 9:51, the sound arrived. It came from the west first, low and rolling, like weather. Heads turned. Then it came from the east, too, and the north road, and the south, and the whole town square began to vibrate. 40 motorcycles entered Garrison in formation, 2 by 2, chrome catching the morning sun. But they hadn't come alone. Behind them rolled Maxine's Buick. Behind the Buick, Sheriff Tibbs' cruiser, lights off, making a point by existing. And behind the cruiser came half of Cooper's Crossing, the motel manager, the Lutheran choir, ranchers, truckers, the woman from the post office who had once said the word drugs and now held a thermos of coffee for whoever needed it. Florence watched them fill the square, and her knees nearly went. "You came back," she whispered when Cole reached her. "You foolish, foolish boys. You came back."
"Ma'am," Cole said, "we never left. We just got out of sight." At 10 sharp, the county clerk cleared his throat and began reading the legal description of Parcel 9, the Hayes property, into a portable microphone. Vance checked his watch. His lawyer straightened his tie. "Do I hear an opening bid?"
60,000, Vance said, bored.
100,000, said Cole Bennett. The square went silent. Vance turned slowly and for the first time looked, really looked, at the man in the leather vest. 120, Vance snapped. 200. A murmur ran through the crowd. Vance's lawyer leaned in and whispered. Vance shook him off. 250, Vance said, and now his voice had an edge, because this was no longer about the parcel. This was about being seen to lose. 300,000, Cole said, and before you answer, you should probably talk to the lady walking up behind you. Vance turned. Investigator Renata Vossler of the Montana Department of Justice did not hurry up the courthouse steps. Women holding 4 arrest warrants rarely hurry. Behind her came 2 state troopers and a forensic accountant who looked delighted to be outdoors. "This auction is suspended by order of the state," she announced, holding up the paper. "Preston Vance, you are under arrest for fraudulent practices, forgery of financial instruments, and exploitation of the elderly." "This is absurd," Vance actually laughed. "Do you know who I am? Call my office. Call the governor's office." "Sir, the governor's office is how I got the warrants signed this fast." Vossler nodded to the troopers. 6 refinance agreements, Mr. Vance. 6 forged signatures. We have the originals from your office safe. We have your handwriting exemplars. And we have a witness. On cue, Lorraine Dunn stepped out of the crowd. She looked smaller than she did behind a desk, and braver. "Lorraine," Vance said softly, and the threat in it carried 10 rows back. "Think carefully." "I have thought carefully." Her voice didn't shake. "I thought carefully for 2 years, and I am done thinking carefully. I watched you steal from old people who trusted my bank. It ends today." The troopers came up the steps, and Preston Vance, who had walked into a widow's diner and offered her bingo on Thursdays, made his last mistake. He ran. He made it 11 feet. Then he hit a wall of leather that had quietly closed around the courthouse steps, and the wall did not move. No fists, no shoves. 40 men simply stood shoulder to shoulder, hands folded, and let geometry do the work. Vance bounced off Hollis's chest and sat down hard on the cold steps. And the cameras, the same county paper that had run "gang compound" in 70-point type, caught every frame of it. The cuffs clicked twice. Somewhere in the crowd, the Lutheran choir started humming, of all things, "Amazing Grace," and nobody told them to stop. A reporter pushed a microphone at Cole. "Sir, you're with the Hells Angels. Why is a motorcycle club involved in a fraud case?" Cole looked at the camera the way a man looks at a thing he's decided not to fear. "Last winter, that woman over there opened her door to 40 strangers in a blizzard, fed us everything she had, asked for nothing." He paused. "Nobody freezes on our road, and nobody steals from family. Print that." They printed it. By evening, it was on news sites in 9 states. The legal unwinding took weeks, but the bones of it landed fast. The forged refinance was void, which meant the acceleration was void, which meant the auction should never have existed. The bank, suddenly terrified of headlines, forgave the penalties and restructured the original balance at terms an 80-year-old could carry. Whitfield made them put it in writing twice, and the 5 families who had already lost everything to Sutter Ridge got calls from the Department of Justice about restitution. Maxine Croft personally drove to each house to deliver the news, with pie. As for Vance, the state froze Sutter Ridge's assets by Friday. His lawyer quit. His partners scattered. The man who collected old people's lives at 60 cents on the dollar would eventually trade a corner office for a cell. And the prosecutors had Lorraine's files. All of them. Every page. But the moment nobody in Garrison ever forgot happened after the warrants, after the cameras, after the cuffs. Florence Hayes walked up the courthouse steps, past the troopers, and stopped in front of the man being led away. The square held its breath. She looked at Preston Vance for a long moment. "I'd have made you a plate, you know," she said, "if you'd ever just asked for help instead of taking it. That's the part I'll pray about." Then she turned to the crowd, to her town and her boys, and her voice found its strength. "Well, I don't know about anyone else, but I've got a diner that needs opening. First 40 customers eat free." 40 engines answered her like one animal waking up. The ride home stretched 2 miles long. Bikes, pickups, the Buick, the choir van, all strung down Highway 212 in the April light. People honked from driveways. Kids waved from fences, and at the front of it all rode an 80-year-old widow in the sidecar Hollis had bolted on that morning, just in case. Her church coat snapped in the wind like a flag. The new sign went up in May. Hollis welded the frame. Tripp painted the letters, twice, because Florence said the first F leaned. When they pulled the tarp off, The whole town was standing in the parking lot eating donated pie. Florence's. Everyone eats. Underneath, in smaller letters, a second line that made truckers slow down just to read it. Official stop of the Hells Angels. Behave accordingly. The chapter made it formal at their spring meeting. Cooper's Crossing became a sanctioned stop on every run between Denver and Calgary, which meant that on any given week, somewhere between 2 and 40 motorcycles sat outside the diner, and the crime rate in Cooper's Crossing, already low, hit 0 and stayed there. Katie ran the counter now, manager in everything but title, and Florence finally took Sundays off. Mostly. Taking Sunday off meant cooking for whoever showed up anyway, but sitting down while she did it. Wade's booth stayed Wade's booth. Nobody sat there without asking Florence first, and a small framed photograph appeared on the wall above it. A skinny young man in an army jacket, squinting into the sun, taken the year before everything went wrong. Cole had carried it in his saddlebag for 2 years. It looked better on a wall. On the first Sunday of every month, the full chapter rode in. 40 engines coming down Highway 212 sounded like thunder to strangers. To Cooper's Crossing, it sounded like church bells. People set their clocks by it. Kids ran to the fence line to count the bikes. And every one of those Sundays ended the same way. Florence at the head of the long table they'd built from 2 old doors. She said grace over 40 bowed heads, some of them believers, all of them respectful. She never had children. She'd told Cole that the first night, plain, the way she said hard things. But she had 40 sons who called her Miss Florence, who fixed her gutters, who learned to crimp pie crust with tattooed hands. She had Katie, who she was quietly teaching everything. She had a town that had remembered her name, and on the hard days, when Walter felt very far away, she had a phone that never stayed quiet long. One evening in June, Cole found her on the porch, watching the sun go down behind the mountains. "Can I ask you something, Miss Florence? That night, 40 strangers in leather, beating on your door in a blizzard. Weren't you afraid?" Florence rocked a moment, considering it honestly. "Of course I was," she said. "But I've been alone, hun. Alone is scarier." Cole nodded slowly and let the sunset finish. Some answers you don't follow up on. You just carry them. 1 year after the blizzard, a stranger walked into Florence's on a cold night and asked about the booth in the corner. The one with the photograph, where a cup of coffee sat steaming with nobody behind it. Katie poured it fresh every evening at 6. 2 sugars. Nobody had ever asked her to. Some things a diner just knows. "That's Wade's seat," Florence told the stranger, setting down a menu. "He's running a little late. You hungry, hun?" Outside, 2 Harleys idled in the lot under the new sign, keeping watch the way they always would. They never left her side. They never will. I told this story because the world taught a whole town to fear 40 men in leather. An 80-year-old widow just saw cold people who needed soup. She didn't check the jackets, and that one small choice rebuilt more than any wrecking ball ever tore down. Kindness keeps receipts. Be the blue door. So here's my question for you. If 40 Hells Angels knocked on your door at midnight in a blizzard, would you have opened it? Be honest in the comments. I read every one. If this story warmed you up even a little, share it with someone who still believes in people. And subscribe, because there are more stories like Florence's out there, and somebody has to tell them.